Howdy folks, Little John out in the brewery. I'm in the middle of transferring the Eclipse XVA, the Dark Moon Sun all grain brew from the all-rounder into kegs. Obviously under pressure on a closed transfer, so it's happening nice and slowly as I speak. I'm on the first keg, so we'll let it go. And while that's happening, I've got 2 bottles here. It's been a bit of a kegging and a bit of a packaging day. This is 2 bottles which are from the recent batch of the Cooper's Crown Ale, the Golden Crown, which I done with enzyme and dextrose, a split batch to do that comparison. I've had them in kegs for 2 weeks, and this morning I bottled them up. They were gassed up nicely, so I bottled them up for the younger brother. Kept myself a couple of bottles of each, and I might as well sit down and do a tasting on this one and see how these are going along at the moment. I will probably do a further look at these a bit further down the track when they've had a little bit of time in the bottle, but get into them now and see how they're going. So before we do that, thumbs up to Little John's Patreons. Thanks for your support, guys, very much appreciated. Link down the bottom in the comments if you're interested in having a look what Patreon's about. Check it out, might be for you. If not, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and either way, hit the like button. As I said, this batch I was looking to compare trying to do a dry brew by using dry enzyme but keeping more malt in the actual beer itself initially in the ferment, and using the dry enzyme to bring it down dry, to see how that will compare to doing a brew with a much higher percentage of dextrose and using that to bring your body down, and seeing what the result came out like. So I used a can of Cooper's Golden Crown. Yeah, I will put a link back through to Brew Day. And I've got to say, I'm loving bottling from the keg. Like that's a whole bottle just drained, no problem at all, not a hint of sediment or anything there. Now you could neck it from the bottle quite easily if you wanted to. So yeah, as I said, Golden Crown. So the fella on your right, my left, is the dry enzyme version, and it was brewed, I said, they're half batches. So the numbers I'm going to quote would be based if you're doing a full batch. So this was basically 800 grams of light dry malt added to the tin, which got an original gravity of 1034, and I then added 1.5 grams of dry enzyme, so half a packet of the dry enzyme straight into the fermenter with the yeast. Now I used some slurry from some 3470 from a previous batch. It's about 200 ml in each fermenter, which I estimated was going to be around the number I needed to do a healthy ferment on these brews. They were done in the normal 15 litre fermenters, so no pressure ferment or anything like that, and I've done it 12 degrees. Batch on your left, my right, was done with 800 grams of dextrose and 200 grams of light dry malt for an original gravity of 1038, so 4 points higher. I was trying to compensate here, trying to get a point where I was going to balance out with the final gravity drop with the two beers, so they're going to be fairly similar. In the end, what I got was the dry enzyme finished at 1004, which was sort of where I was expecting or hoping to get down to. I was hoping for 02, 04, somewhere in that mark. So getting fairly dry without being wickedly dry. But what surprised me a little bit was that the dextrose actually got down to the same point, the 04. So even starting 4 points higher, it's finished 4 points further down. So what we've ended up with is a 4% beer and a 4.5% beer. Really fairly inconsequential one way or another. Should be able to compare them reasonably well. First thing I'm looking at initially is that the dextrose brew has very little head. It's possibly a little bit less carbed than the malt version and the enzyme, and whether that's anything to do with the dextrose or the dry enzyme, I can't really say. They've both been in the keg, they've both been on the same pressure for 2 weeks. So the only thing I could sort of come up with there would maybe that the dextrose version, the dextrose version maybe had less CO2 in solution when it was going into the keg initially, and it just hasn't got quite the same level at this point in time, and may have needed just a little bit longer. But that being said, there is a nice level of carbonation on that brew. And to look at them side by side, again, the dextrose is a little bit lighter in colour, and that's to be expected. This one's got quite a whack of dry malt in there, so you're gonna get a difference in colour. So let's get into some tasting. So there's no real smell. Notice again, basic straight up kit beer. No hops added to them at all. No dry hop, no late boil, no steeping, no anything. Just a straight up kit with some dextrose or some malt. Righto, that's fairly flavourless, which at 1004 one would expect. This is what your dry enzyme is going to do. It's going to drag a lot of your flavour out. It's taking all that sugars and stuff and pulling them out. You're getting back not too far off, back to water to some degree. So you can't expect to have, you're not expecting to have a lot of flavour. You drink any dry beer, there's not a flavour. Carlton Dry, that bottle that's come out of, been using 2 extra dry bottles from the brother. These new Super Crisp lagers, and Great Northern and Iron Jack and stuff like that. There's very little flavour. You can't have flavour. You can't get that crispness and that lightness and have a lot of flavour. The two don't go together. But if that's the kind of beer you're after, it's bang in the mark. It's in that range. It's in that sort of ballpark. It's in that area. There's some malt there, a little bit of hop, not a lot, but there is some there. Not quite as crisp as I would have expected, but it is reasonably clean and light. Again, that could be part of the malt, but anyway, let's go this fella. Now I said, this is 0.5% alcohol stronger than the final beer, and that's purely through the ferment. Still there's probably a tad more nose on this. There's a little bit more of that dirty Aussie lager smell, the Pride of Ringwood. It is a little bit more noticeable in this, and I think again that's probably going to be because there's probably a little bit more malt covering it in the other version. So I said this is mostly just pretty much all Dex. Okay, same thing. It's very dry, very light on the flavour. Still not quite as crisp as I would have expected. But it's very clean, it's fresh. It's got those typical flavours of the style. Again, same with the other. There's a bit of malt, there's some dirty hop. It's easy to drink. There's not a lot of body going on. There's a little bit of body there compared to what you might be expecting to get with a dry beer, and I think having made a bit more of an effort to get a little bit lower, then that may have increased that a little bit. Pardon me. But for the most part, we've definitely got that dry Aussie style of beer, and boom, shutting down. I'm actually fairly surprised at how clean they are for being just a straight up kit beer. I mean, there's a little bit of kit background there, but it's not a lot. It's not massive, and most people, in all honesty, would probably just put it down to the flavour of the beer. It's part of the dirty, it's almost a bit of a soapy sort of a flavour, which most people are going to attribute to the beer itself, and not really pick it as a flaw in the, or anything like that, as an off flavour. So very surprising from that angle, but again, it sort of speaks to the whole thing of having a good quality, yeast pitch, at good numbers, and fermenting at the appropriate temperatures. How much effect, just the amount of effect, positive effect that can have on your beer. Okay, right now I'm going to say that I think the dextrose has possibly a cleaner flavour. Doesn't quite have as much of that weird, like I said, that soapy, twangy. Yeah, it's definitely cleaner, the dextrose. So I've got to attribute that to the enzyme and its part. And I'm going to assume that to some degree its whole interaction with the malt and that's already in the beer. So this really surprises me, and it irks me a little bit, but I've got to say, in this case, it would certainly appear that using a vast majority of dextrose has produced a better beer than using the light dry malt. But of course, as I say, that being said, I think the factor of the dry enzyme is part of that issue. So the beer with no dry enzyme, which is just using all, the base malts of the tin and the sugar, has produced a better beer than the kit that's been made and using the dry enzyme to get the gravity down. So probably speaks to the dry enzyme more so than to the dextrose, but it certainly is interesting from the standpoint that, yeah, if you're wanting to make a dry beer, and now this is only off this one example, this is possibly not going to work across every single beer, but this is certainly giving some direction into a method. I think the standard's always been that you just use, you want a dry beer, throw some dry enzyme in. And I know there's a lot of brewers that do it pretty much every beer they brew for different reasons. Sometimes it's for keeping the carbs down, eating a bit more of the sugar, having less calories. And for some people it's just keeping the body lighter because they don't like too much body in their beer. But from this, I've probably got to suggest that if that's what you're after, look to be going down the road of using more dextrose, but make sure you're getting your yeast and your temperature right at the back end. I think at the end of, with these parameters, and what we've done here with the malts and the dextrose, is that the dextrose, with the control of a good quantity yeast and a good temperature, has produced a decent, and drinkable beer. And that's decent. Again, it's not bloody, it's not superb, it's not bloody, it's not brilliant, but from this point, just for a minute, I'll just take the dry enzyme out of the equation, just out for discussion for a second. Let's just talk this. For a simple kit beer, with the majority of dextrose, a little bit of dry malt, and some yeast. For someone who wants to drink these dry styles, or the modern crisp lagers, and that's what you're trying to make, very cheaply and very easily, you're there. Okay, now, yes, I've used lager yeast, so that's a higher cost if you're buying the yeast, but realistically only on your first batch. So use a slurry on this. Keep a whack of your slurry, use it on the next batch. Go back, look at the video on reusing your yeast. Perfect for this sort of thing, and it's essentially what I've done on this. I took the yeast from one batch and pitched it straight onto the next. On the same, I'm pretty sure it was the same day by memory, or might have been the next day. I might have taken the yeast off and held it and dumped it the next day. But either way, simply by reusing that yeast from the batch before and getting plenty of yeast numbers on there, keeping the temperature down in a good range, 12 degrees. And ferment took, this was batched on the 14th of January. I bottled it on the 28th. Sorry, went to kegs on the 28th. So either way, bottling kegs, whatever. 14 days. 14 days lager in the keg, done. You could have been drinking it 14 days in, if you wanted to force carb it. If you're running this under pressure, you would have been drinking it that day, and potentially maybe a few days earlier if you wanted to push the temperature a little bit. But I'm still out on whether that's really a good option, whether that's something you should be doing, or whether that's just a bit of hoo-ha. But cheap, easy to drink, You get the mates around, you slap out bloody an esky full of bottles of that, or you know, stick a keg on the tap. Your mates are drinking that thinking you're a fucking champion. They really are. They're not complaining that your home brew's no good, that's for sure. It looks the business. It's all good. And again, Cooper's Golden Crown. Do this process with whatever. Try it with different base, different different can base. You're going to get a slightly different result with each different one. Golden Crown may not have been the best option for doing this kind of beer, but it's what I had at the time. So I will revisit this experiment, well, not so much revisit, but I will go with a high dextrose content version of the Muttons lagers that I've got. I've got the 6-pack, and that will be part of one of those experiments coming up. I'll be doing a variety of malt and sugar combinations to see how they travel, and that's going to be, one of them will be a high dextrose batch, and see how it goes. But I mean, that's the end of the day, same as everything. Different kits are going to give you a slightly different result, and it's going to be a personal preference, what works best for you. But anyway, done. I'm still transferring here, nice and slowly, very bloody slowly. I could throw a bit more pressure onto this, but we'll see. I'm in no massive hurry. So that's it. So I think both of these methods have worked in their own way. But I think from that, yeah, I certainly, on this side, am erring towards this using high quantity of dextrose as opposed to a dry enzyme to get your light beer. If you wanted to really take this up a notch, you could possibly go with all dextrose. As I said, there's 20% dry malt still in that batch. You could have taken that out, and maybe you could pull an extra point or two down in the gravity and get it even a little bit crisper. How that would pan out in the final flavours, I don't know. Maybe that's something for something to be looked at and played around with. But yeah, I can't recommend using the dry enzyme as your option. It's only one batch, but I'm not going to do too many more. I'm not really looking to play around too much with that. That got a better beer. I'm happy to play with that going forward on other batches, which you'll see coming up in the coming months. We'll see how this goes with, like I said, with that lager base particularly, going forward. So, as always, guys, you got any questions, and ladies, got any questions, stick them down the bottom. Any comments, stick them down the bottom. Again, thank you to the Patreons. Cheers to everybody who subscribed. Again, if you haven't, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell, get notified when Little John's got a new video coming up for you to look at. In the meantime, if you haven't hit the like button, please do. Please hit the like button. Hit the like button. Take the video out of your like list once you've done it. I don't care. That doesn't matter. Hit the like button. No, that's good for me. Does good things for Little John. Keeps me going. Keeps me experimenting, playing around, and means I get to drink beer with you lovely people. But that's me. So until I see you again, we're brewing beer, talking beer, or drinking beer. Good brewing.